Hi, everybody, and welcome to Chee-Tash. My name is Chris Lazar, your host for this virtual book club. And I want to apologize because I never gave any of you guys a heads up of the next book that we are doing. And it's actually, this book that right now that you see on the screen called The Alchemist. So the last book that we finished last week, was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And I got that book from a friend. My friend gave me two books. One of them was Man's Search for Meaning. So I thought, okay, this would be I've heard a lot about this book. I've never read it. Small book, relatively short, but very powerful book, as if you guys go back and listen to those episodes, we got a lot out of that book. The other book that he gave me was The Alchemist. So I thought, you know what? Since these are, the books that he was kind enough to give me, why not start with these for the channel, for Chee-Tash? So that's what we're doing. We're moving on to The Alchemist, which is a little bit of a different book. It's a novel by Paulo Coelho, a Brazilian author, I believe. And just a little bit of a background. I just started off here, guys, pages just 1 through 27 we'll go through. This is counting the forward. So just a little bit about the book. Book did not have much success starting out. Remember all the information that Victor told us about the book? When he was first coming out with it, he didn't want to publish it with his name. He didn't really want it to succeed. It ended up succeeding a lot. Well, something similar here where, to start out, it didn't really sell that well. One person bought a copy the first week it came out in Brazil. His publisher cut him loose after that, probably because he didn't have enough sales. But this guy never lost faith. And doesn't that sound familiar after we just read Man's Search for Meaning? Paulo kept knocking on doors. He found a new publisher, got it published again. It's gained traction in Brazil. And then somebody from the United States came to Brazil and just so happened to find the book. He convinced Paulo, hey, let's try it out in the U.S. Next thing you know, Bill Clinton read it, Madonna read it, and then it kind of just took off, and it was a New York Times bestseller, super successful book. And it's been out for a while. I have the 25th anniversary edition of it. I found it interesting. He wrote it in 14 days, and he started writing when he was 40. I don't think The Alchemist was his first book. I don't think it was. But isn't that interesting how, at a slightly older age where you don't really see too many people starting projects, starting things anew, trying to get a new identity, new things. Started at 40. Started writing at 40. Wow. I think that this will be a very powerful book too. Slightly different, like I said, it'll be a novel, but already from the first 27 pages, you see a lot of some themes that are going to come up, and some allegories that'll come up. This is like a fictional story, but it has a lot to do. It has ties to your life. A lot of ties. I can just kind of tell reading the first 27 pages. Before we start that, we're introduced to this prologue. And in the prologue, we are introduced to this person who's named the Alchemist. And he's reading a book, this book of Narcissus. And I think we've heard of Narcissus before, like you're narcissistic, like you're in love with yourself. So Narcissus knelt by a lake. He was so infatuated with his reflection from the lake. He fell in and he drowned in the lake. And then apparently a flower was born at that spot, and that flower was called a narcissus. The story continues, though. This was a part of the story that I didn't know, and maybe this is just for the Alchemist, particularly for the Alchemist. The goddess of the forest appeared at the lake and found that the lake, which was a freshwater lake, was now a salt lake of tears. And the goddess asked the lake, "Why do you weep?" And the lake said, she, I'm assuming it's a she, wept for Narcissus. And the goddess mentions like, well, yeah, we all weep, because, yeah, and you especially, because you got to see Narcissus's beauty up close. And the lake goes, well, I didn't know Narcissus was beautiful. And the goddess says, well, Narcissus knelt by your side on the banks. You never noticed that? And the lake says, well, I weep because every time he knelt by my banks, I could see the depths of his eyes and my own beauty reflected. So the lake misses Narcissus for the lake's narcissistic reasons, kind of. Very interesting. Right? I guess what the story maybe is trying to say is like I feel like this narcissist story is told in like a negative light, right? Like you don't want to be like that. But now here comes the lake, and the lake has its own narcissistic reasons. Basically, we all have a little bit of narcissist. In some ways, you kind of need it, in a way. I'm not saying you need to be fascinated with yourself, but you need to be your biggest fan. If nobody's going to love you, who's going to love? Who else will? If you don't love yourself, right? You have to be your biggest fan. Have to be your biggest fan. I think that's what the story is telling us. We all have a little bit of that narcissist in us. And with that, part 1 starts. And we are introduced to a boy named Santiago. And we are introduced to this young boy at an abandoned church with his sheep. And we don't know exactly how he got here yet, but he's in there with his sheep. He's got them cornered off so they don't escape. Nobody comes in here messing with his sheep. We don't really know what he does at this point. Maybe he's a shepherd. Could be. It continues on. Like the sheep seems like he's been with the sheep for a while, or he's been doing this for a while, because it mentions that the sheep wake up when he does, and the sheep seem like very accustomed to them. And he actually does mention something about this, how, wherever he goes, the sheep will go. The sheep trust him. The sheep actually have ignored their instincts, and now they totally rely on him for, food, water, shelter, protection, right? They're on his time, right? So he has to have been with these sheep for a while. All right. That's kind of what we've figured out so far in these first few pages. And now we're introduced to this thing that he has a reoccurring dream. This is first mentioned, I think, on page 5. Page 6, top of page 6 of my edition. He had the same dream that night as a week ago, and once again he had awakened before it ended. So what is the dream? He's had a reoccurring dream. Obviously, this is something important. Come to find out, he is going to be going to a village. He needs to go see a merchant that shears his sheep, probably pays him, right? So this is maybe how he makes his money. And he also is going to this merchant for some other selfish reasons, in that there's a daughter of the merchant, that he wants to go visit with. It seems like he kind of likes this girl. I'll say that. And this is when the story kind of flashes back to when he first met the girl. So he's first at the merchant, talking to the merchant. He says, I need to sell some wool. Merchant says, well, I only come back in like a few hours. Wait until the afternoon, the merchant says. So he sits down, he reads a book, and next thing you know, this girl pops up asking him some questions like, how do you know how to read? And how long? Well, usually they talked for a couple hours, right? And and I wrote here, like, it made him forget about the wandering, because he at one point says he hoped that the merchant didn't actually shear his sheep until like a few days later, because he was having such a good time talking to this girl. So it's obvious he really likes this girl, and he can't wait to go back to the merchant. Right here on page 8, he would hope that her father would stay busy and keep him waiting for 3 days. Yep. But he didn't. Eventually he gets the sheep sheared, and he's asked to come back the following year. And then it kind of shifts back to present time, and now he's only 4 days out from being back in that same village. And let's continue. Let me move on to the next slide. Sheep. Yes. We were talking about this a little bit. How the sheep. It doesn't say how many sheep he has, but it's got to be a decent amount. They trust him a lot. Like I said, they've forgotten their instincts. They just totally trust him. But it's weird here. The reoccurrence of the dream is making him angry towards the sheep. This was weird. This was something that I didn't really understand. And there's something about this dream. We're going to find out here in a second. This dream is going to be pretty important. Right here at the top of page 10, the boy was surprised at his thoughts. Maybe the church, with the sycamore growing from within, had been haunted. It had caused him to have the same dream for a second time. It was causing him to feel anger toward his faithful companions. That is interesting. Why is this making him angry towards his sheep? The occurrence of this dream. What did the sheep do to kind of get these feelings out of him about to make him feel some type of way, Very, very interesting so far. I'm going to continue. We learn a little bit here about Santiago's background starting on page 10. So we learn that he comes from Andalusia, which is somewhere in Spain. His parents wanted him to become a priest. It would have been a source of pride for the family to have a son who was a priest. His family was just a simple farm community. They were from a farming community. They were farmers themselves. But here's the thing is, he wanted to travel. He didn't want to become the priest. And it seems like they spent a lot of time, maybe effort, money. I don't know what time period this takes place, but, they had him in classes. He said he studied Latin, Spanish, theology. But ever since he had been a child, he just wanted to know the world. And this was more important to him than knowing God and learning about man's sins. So he summons up the courage to tell his father he didn't want to become a priest. He wanted to travel. I've definitely that's a tough conversation to have. think about the biggest pressures, like, often do come from, like, your closest relatives, family, friends. That's the biggest pressure, because you get comfortable around them, and you fear the rejection or criticism from those, because you want to stay in that community, and you think that, well, if they're critical, it's almost like firing off synapses of, like, ancient ancestors, saying, like, oh my gosh, if they're critical, they might kick me out of this tribe and I'm left tribeless. But we naturally do need a group. We naturally are social. Human beings are very social. So think about how hard this conversation is to have with your father, because I've had conversations like this with my father. You don't want to go this route. You want to go this other route, right? And it seems like his father was kind of open to it, albeit his father tries to talk him out of it, it seems like. Right here, page 11, and he says here, people from all over the world have passed through this village, son. They come in search of new things, but when they leave, they are basically the same people they were when they arrived. So here's what I think the father says. I think he's saying, here's I think his main point from this is that you think that it's so special, and you think it's like this wonderful thing, but nothing really ever changes, right? Even if you do travel around, you're still going to be you. You're the same people when they are basically the same people they were when they arrived. But basically and here's something else he says, but basically they're the same as the people who live right here. So there's nothing, the grass always seems greener on the other side, I think is what the father here is trying to say. Right? It seems like, think about, like, what's kind of the equivalent to this in, like, our lives, maybe like Hollywood, where it seems like sunshines and rainbows, but you don't understand how hard it is to get work, to quote unquote make it. Even the things you do get, the jobs you do get, you probably don't get paid much, right? It takes a long time, but all you see is, like, the fantasy of it. I think that's what he's trying to tell his son here on page 11. But, what ends up happening is his dad ends up saying, okay, you know what? Go ahead. If you want to live this lifestyle, he gives him some money to start his own flock, right? But he does warn him. And he says, the people, when they see our land, they say that they would like to live here forever, is what his father says. Again, maybe another warning. Saying, yeah, it's nice to travel, but have you thought about all the negative aspects of it? You just see the good, but you got to take the good with the bad of it. There's two sides to every coin. Santiago is very gung-ho about it, takes the money. He seems like very excited. And he thinks that his father might be warning him. This is what, on page 12, the boy could see in his father's gaze a desire to be able himself to travel the world. A desire that was still alive despite his father's having had to bury it over dozens of years. So he thinks that his dad has regrets from it. And he's trying to keep his son from following in this alternative path. He wants his son to follow kind of down his path, stay here, become a priest, be close to family. And you know what? I can sympathize with what Santiago is kind of contemplating here. Right? You want to break free and live your own life. I get that. But maybe, do you think that his father is onto something maybe a little bit? Let's continue. I'm going to move this slide. Here we go. And he has certainly done a lot. So Santiago, it seems like he's been on this journey for a while. He's traveled many, many places, it seems like. And this quote here, I couldn't have found God in the seminary. What he's saying here is that he's learned more, experienced so much more out in the world than he could have in the seminary. And what he thinks is he has seen God in like nature, the environment that he's been a part of, and in the interesting towns, cities, women that he has seen and experienced. Right? So it seems like he is very happy with his decision to be a shepherd and to travel the world. It's the possibility of having a dream come true that makes life interesting. So another ode, reference to this dream possibly that he's been having. Let's continue. He's 4 days out from meeting with the merchant, getting his sheep sheared, and then also getting finally back in touch with this girl, right, that he's been waiting to. I think he really likes her. But before that, he wants to stop in Tarifa, kind of get spruced up, get refreshed before he goes to see the merchant and seemingly more importantly, the merchant's daughter. So he remembers, though, in Tarifa, there was an old woman who interpreted dreams there. This starts on page 14. So this dream is obviously something that has been bothering Santiago. So he seeks this woman out. This woman ends up leading him into a room. It's said that the room is pretty bland. Not much in it besides an image of the Sacred Heart of Jesus and 2 chairs. She takes his hands and she begins to quietly pray. And now Santiago's starting to have second thoughts. The prayer sounds like a gypsy prayer. And he almost is starting to think like, oh my gosh, I've had experiences with gypsies before. She might be trying to trick me into something. And he's trying not to let the woman know that he's thinking this. Like he says that his hands actually start to tremble because he had great fears of gypsies when he was a kid, thinking that he might get kidnapped by them. And he became so nervous, though, like thinking about this, thinking about if she's going to trick him, that his hands shaking, he pulled them away. And he instantly, I think he regrets coming to see this woman. He thought for a moment that it would be better to pay her fee and leave without learning a thing, that he was giving too much importance to his recurrent dream. So in a way he wants to know about it, but in another way maybe he's scared about what it might mean. And what does the gypsy lady tell him? So she says she's going to charge a fee for the consultation. And he's like, oh boy, this is the trick. This is what I should have listened to my own advice maybe and just left right away. But he keeps on conversing with her. He says a shepherd always takes his chances with the wolves and with the drought. That's what makes a shepherd's life exciting. So you know what? We're already in here. We're just going to keep burrowing forward. And he explains, I've had the same dream twice. I'm in a field. A child appears, starts playing with my sheep. Next thing you know, the child takes both of my hands and then transports me to the Egyptian pyramids. The child says, if you come here, you will find a hidden treasure. And then Santiago wakes up. And that's his dream. Now, the woman says something very interesting. And maybe, Santiago's intuitions about this gypsy trying to trick him probably just came true right now. Because the woman forgoes the payment. So Santiago's like, okay, sweet. I don't have to pay anything right now. But she requests payment when the treasure is found. She says that she wants 1/10 of the treasure when he finds it. And she asks him to swear by it. Actually, a few times. She says, swear on the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And then she kind of gives him a lackluster interpretation. She says, you must go to the pyramids in Egypt. I have never heard of them, but if it was a child who showed them to you, they exist. There you will find a treasure that will make you a rich man. This is her interpretation. So Santiago's irritated. He's like, why? I didn't even need this interpretation. I could have figured that out myself. Right? And he says, well, at least I didn't have to pay, and I'm not even going to go bother looking for this treasure. That way, I don't feel on the hook that I owe this lady anything. Because if I found the treasure, then I'd owe her 1/10 of it. I would owe her 1/10 of it. All right. So I'm not even going to bother with it. So she kind of shoos him away because he kind of alludes to, well, how do I even get to Egypt? What if I never even get there? And, she says, well, it wouldn't be the first time I wouldn't get paid. And right here is, from here on out, he decides that he would not believe in dreams. And it's the simple things in life that are most extraordinary. This was something that the gypsy woman had said in regards to his dream is a very difficult one to interpret, possibly because it's so simple. The answer is like right there, kind of maybe in front of him, but he still doesn't really know. He still doesn't really know what's in the treasure. He still doesn't really even know, if I can go back here, who this child is. Where, does the field matter? What's with the Egyptian pyramids? How does that play into all of this? But he decides from here on out he would not believe in dreams. So that's kind of interesting. He thinks of it as kind of a waste of time. It is how I'm interpreting it. This has caused me a lot of trouble. I'm not even going to think about it. Thinking about it too much. Let me just live my life, keep traveling. So is he kind of running away from some issues here? That's maybe why he wants to travel so much. Keep moving, keep his mind occupied on something instead of facing an issue, straight ahead, kind of. I remember Viktor Frankl talking about that. Facing issues just straight ahead. Not looking to your past, but forging something in the future. Let's continue here. Next slide. If you thought that woman was bad. On the next page, page 18, so he decides to stop for a break, samples some wine, sits down, lets his sheep do their thing. And then next thing you know, he starts reading a book. Starts reading the book a little bit, and then an old man arrives and wants to start a conversation with him. Who is this guy? He tries to start a conversation, and you can tell that Santiago does not want to talk to him. He gives him like a one-word answer. The guy asks him, what are they doing? And pointing to people in the field, and the boy just says, working. Making it look like he wanted to concentrate on his reading, is what Paulo writes. And the old man just keeps persisting. He actually asks Santiago for some of his wine. And Santiago gives it to him, hoping that would be the end of it, but it's not. Old man keeps coming back for more. So Santiago, he doesn't want to be rude, because he does say that he respects the elderly. Something that his father taught him. So instead he shows the old man the book that he's reading in the hopes that maybe he doesn't know how to read, and when he gets the book in his hands, he'll feel embarrassed and just want to leave. He'll feel too ashamed of not having known how to read. But the old man is very interesting. He takes the book and he says, this is an important book, but it's really irritating. The boy, Santiago, is shocked. The old man ends up, wow, he actually, he does know how to read. Wow. And the old man continues on. It's a book that says the same thing almost all other books in the world say. It describes people's inability to choose their own personal legends. And it ends up saying that everyone believes the world's greatest lie. So how does this old man know about this book? Is he just kind of like making this up? How does he know this? And look at how Santiago kind of reacts to him compared to the gypsy woman. The gypsy woman, he automatically thinks like, hey, this is a trick. This old man, I think he sees something different in him. And he's going to remark on the way he's dressed. He's dressed like an Arab, which isn't really too far-fetched, as Africa is only a few hours from the town he's in is Tarifa. So now the boy is very curious. So what's the world's greatest lie, he asks. And the old man replies this. It's this, that at a certain point in our lives, we lose control of what's happening to us, and our lives become controlled by fate. That's the world's greatest lie. And now automatically Santiago says, well, that's never happened to me. No, I do whatever I want. Kind of like I wanted to be a priest, but instead I'm a shepherd. I get to travel the world. I control my life. You think so? Anytime somebody, it seems like I can just picture this conversation going like this, Santiago just being really, really, really quick about it. Like the old man struck a nerve by saying that. Like it's something personal to Santiago, like, oh, well, that doesn't happen to me. No. I travel. I'm a shepherd. Are we getting at something here? Or is Santiago kind of self-conscious about something? So now the old man, Santiago's trying to gather information from him. he's dressed like an Arab. He says he's from many places, but he was born in Salem. Now, and then he says he's the king of Salem. His name is Melchizedek. And then he actually calls out the boy's dream. He even says to the boy, like, oh, you really like to travel. And Santiago doesn't mention anything about it. He knows about his dream. He knows about his family. Right? He actually, in the sand, the old man actually writes in the sand. Let me see where it was. The small city, the boy read the names of his father, his mother, the name of the seminary he attended, name of the merchant's daughter, which he hadn't even known, and read the things he had never told anyone. So how does this old man know about this stuff? He knows about his dream. The guy actually says, give me 1/10 of your sheep, and I'll tell you how to find the hidden treasure. How does he know about his dream? Who is this guy? And again, 1/10. He wants 1/10 of his sheep. The gypsy wanted 1/10 of the treasure. And we're actually going to see Santiago tries to trick the old man in a way by saying, okay, how about I give you 1/10 of the treasure instead of 1/10 of my sheep? And the old man, seemingly pretty smart, he says, no, you can't give me 1/10 of what you don't have. Right? Santiago's probably thinking, okay, I'm just going to tell him, yeah, you can have my treasure. And then secretly he doesn't even go out and search it. Just says that to get him off his back. Seems like the old man is a little more up to speed compared to the gypsy in a way. Let's continue. This is on page 23. He reveals he's the King of Salem. He asks him about his personal legend, which is, again, something like the biggest lie, the world's greatest lie. And that goes along with the world's greatest lie, according to the old man, and people's inability to choose their own personal legends. And the old man describes a personal legend as, it's what you've always wanted to accomplish. Everybody knows their personal legend when they are young. And then it gets to a point where a mysterious force begins to convince them that it will be impossible for them to realize their personal legend. It appears negative. See, okay, he says that it's something that appears negative, but it actually shows you the way, kind of like an obstacle. And there's actually a book by Ryan Holiday called The Obstacle is the Way. So it's a force. You hear the critics, but you go towards. It's like when you're going through hell, keep going, kind of. That's how you know you're going in the right direction. Sort of is, I think, what this old man is trying to tell Santiago about everybody's personal legend. And then he continues on saying, you can obtain your personal legend. It's something that's deep, embedded in the universe, and the universe is secretly conspiring. And usually you think of that term as something negative, like conspiring against somebody. But the universe, the old man says, is conspiring to help you achieve your personal legend. To realize one's personal legend is a person's only real obligation. All things are one. So this old man knows a lot. How does he know it? I don't know. But there is something about Santiago that is kind of telling him, hey, you don't know your personal legend. You need to find your personal legend. And maybe in a way, Santiago's thinking, well, I already got my personal legend. I travel for a living. I'm with these sheep. I get to experience all this cool stuff. But again, maybe he's preoccupying his mind with something. He doesn't want to confront that thing that he is seeking. Maybe because it's too hard. That's just a guess at this point with the information that we have. Then they talk about bakers and shepherds, saying that, well, bakers are more important people than shepherds, kind of taking it to Santiago here, and he actually makes a dig at Santiago in regards to his occupation here, saying, oh, well, bakers are more important people. People would rather see their children marry bakers than shepherds. And immediately the boy thinks about the girl, the merchant's daughter, and thinking like, oh my God, there's probably so many bakers in that town. Oh my gosh. So it's interesting how he reacts to the old man compared to the gypsy. Like, he's believing everything the old man is saying. And it seems like he knows what he's talking about. He knows all these personal things about him. So maybe that makes him sort of like credible in Santiago's eyes. Let's continue here. In the long run, when people think about shepherds and bakers, becomes more important for them than their own personal legends. So it doesn't matter what you are doing. What matters is the personal legend. Your own compass. Let's call it that. Your own compass. So maybe Santiago still has hope, even if that merchant's daughter is surrounded by 10 bakeries, all these pastry shops. The old man leafed the book. The boy waited, interrupted the old man as he himself had been interrupted. Why are you telling me all this? Finally, let's get down to brass tacks. How do you know all this stuff? Why are you telling me it? And the old man says, because you are trying to realize your personal legend and you are at the point where you are about to give it all up. Interesting. Remember, he said that he wasn't going to pay any more attention to dreams. Very interesting. Very interesting that this old man appears right, on the cusp of him kind of thinking about that, saying that. This old man's really interesting. He tells a story about him confronting like a miner in the same way, talking about how he transforms into a stone to get the miner's attention. The miner throws the stone, it breaks open, and it reveals an emerald. So it seems like this guy is here to help people realize their personal legend. What other role, like where he comes from, is he even a person? Is he a spirit? Is he God? That is still kind of unclear at this point. But he goes on, he's kind of egging on Santiago, like, you need to pursue this personal legend of yours. You need to stop living this lie. He says here, people learn earlier in their lives what is their reason for being. Maybe that's why they give up on it so early too, but that's the way it is. So they give it up because it seems so out of reach, maybe. Very interesting. And this is where he says something interesting about the treasure that is in regards to the boy's dream. The treasure is uncovered by the force of flowing water, and it is buried by the same currents. If you want to learn about your own treasure, you'll have to give me 1/10 of your flock. And this is where the boy says, well, I'll give you 1/10 of my treasure. And he says, well, I'm already promised, I'll give you a tenth of my treasure. I already promised a tenth to the gypsy, so we'll just, we'll square up with you along with the gypsy in the same manner here. And, the old man says gypsies are experts at getting people to do that. And everything in life has its price. And I wrote that here because that is so true. Everything in life has its price. Think about in Santiago's life, the price he paid for not going to seminary, price he pays for traveling. He doesn't really have a home. He has to sleep in this abandoned church. The price that he had to pay to the gypsy, the price that's the merchant pays to shear his sheep. Everything in life has its price. And this is where we are left. The old man returns the book to the boy, and he says, tomorrow bring me a tenth of your flock, and I will tell you how to find the hidden treasure. Good afternoon. And then the page break right there. He vanishes, and then we got the page break. I don't really see chapters in The Alchemist. I just see they have like these page breaks, it looks like. So that's where I chose to end this one. That's page 27 of my edition of The Alchemist, the 25th anniversary edition. Everything in life has its price. Ain't that the truth? Ain't that the truth? So it's interesting. We have this boy, Santiago. He's a shepherd. He's having a dream, reoccurring twice. The gypsy can't really tell him much about it. Maybe she was just trying to get money out of him. The old man tells him exactly all this specific information about him. Now all of a sudden Santiago feels a little weird. Who is this guy? How does he know that stuff? I bet you he does give him a tenth of his sheep. Just for curiosity's sake, because, if Santiago loves to travel so much, why not travel to Egypt to find this treasure? Who is the old man? The dad, we don't know too much about the dad at this point, but maybe the dad himself traveled a lot. And that's why he was trying to warn Santiago, listen, you're traveling so much. I've already did this life. All right. I just never told you about it. You end up right where you started off. Right. It ends up coming full circle. Not saying that you don't progress in life, but you end up realizing what really mattered. It's very interesting start to book, ladies and gentlemen. For next time, I am thinking we'll read another 25 pages. If we do from 27 to... So that would make it... there is chapters. There's a part 1 on page 51. So let's do that. Let's just finish out part 1. So that's about 27 to 50. Let's just do that for next time. And thank you guys very, very much for listening, if you made it this far. My name is Chris Lazar. We will post the next video next week, so you got a week to read 27 through 50 of The Alchemist, and we'll come back next week. We'll talk about it. Please post in the comments if you have any questions, interesting points here. And we'll see you all next time on Chee-Tash. Thanks. Bye.